Hi, my name is Mark Hunter. On Twitter, I'm Tartan Podcast. I'm based in Glasgow and we're filming this in the offices of Podcastmatters where I work. So if you hear phones ringing or people typing emails in the background, just completely ignore that. We're filming it in an actual working office. I'm a podcaster. I'm also a social networker. I'm obviously a Twitter user as well. My job is managing director of Podcastmatters, and we produce social media for clients up and down the country, ranging from schools to local authorities to fashion outlets. My own website, I've got a couple of websites. My blog is tartanstories.com. My music podcast is tartanpodcast.com. Or if you want to check out what we do here at work, it's podcastmatters.co.uk. Just a quick biography about myself. I'm 37 years old. I've got 2 children. I've got another child that's due in T-25 days, which I'm going to start twittering about. So if you look for #baby on Twitter, you can keep up to date with any latest news about our newest arrival. For 18 years I ran a small window cleaning business, but early 2005 I get switched on to new media, podcasting in particular, and I started the Tartan Podcast, which is an indie music show featuring unsigned Scottish bands and artists. And from that I just immersed myself in the social media culture. I got involved with blogging. I started using photo sharing sites like Flickr. When YouTube came along, I was particularly interested in what YouTube had to offer also. Twitter I became aware of Twitter late 2006, and I was trying to think back to when I first heard of it, and I'm pretty sure it was on This Week in Tech. Leo Laporte and the guys, I'm pretty sure we're talking about it. And I did a bit of digging back in my tweets, and my first tweet was on February the 9th, 2007. So just over 2 years ago, I used Twitter for the first time, and my tweet was something to do with being worried about getting stalkers. Now I'm worried that I don't have enough stalkers, so if you'd like to follow me on Twitter, it's Tartan Podcast you need to look for. The main reasons I use Twitter they're fairly varied, but they probably cover the same reasons that most people use Twitter. Part of it is for business reasons. I'll talk about what we're doing at Podcast Matters. Maybe if we're going to meet a client or we're going on a trip to do some presentations, I'll keep Twitter updated as to what I'm doing. Also use it for the sense of community. It's just good to be able to tap into throughout the day a community of people who understand social media. Because this is what we do for a day job, quite a lot of what I need to do week in, week out is explain social media to people who they're maybe a little bit wary of it, perhaps even fearful of it. So it's nice just throughout the day to be able to dip into Twitter, see what other people are saying and doing and talking about, and just tap into that little community of followers or people that I follow on Twitter that are already into social media, they already understand it and that they use it. It's also good for fun as well. If you come across interesting links or you just want to vent or have a laugh about things, Twitter's a great opportunity to do that. For example, last night I started some tweets about Grand Designs, which is a TV show on Channel 4 here in the UK, and I got some nice replies about that, just talking about some of the things on it. So that's one of the great things about Twitter. I'm also going to be keeping people updated, as I mentioned a moment ago, about the imminent birth of our 3rd child. So I'm going to be putting up tweets with the #baby, just with some comments about what's happening with that. The aspects of Twitter that I love the most are probably the community element, but also the immediacy of it. The number of times that, and it's not just me that's experienced this at Podcast Matters, it's the rest of the team. If we've got maybe a technical issue with some particular software that we're using, we can put a question on Twitter and get a response almost immediately. The community element around the Twestival, which took place just a week ago today, was particularly good as well. That was one thing that will forever keep Twitter high up in my profile or high up in my list of things that I love using on the internet and that I'll talk about enthusiastically to other people. I think the Twestival was just an amazing example of how social media can bring people together and create a sense of community. I'm not so much into the celebrity side of things on Twitter, but it's like Stephen Fry and Lance Armstrong twittering. For me, new media, social media has always been about just ordinary people having the voice and the opportunity to speak about things and to punch above their weight when it comes to communicating with other people. These celebrities have already got PR companies. At the drop of the hat, for example, Lance Anderson can call a press conference, and Lance Armstrong can call a press conference and speak to the world about pretty much whatever he wants. But the ordinary person in the street doesn't get the opportunity to do that. However, social media, sites like Twitter, allow people to have that voice. And that's why I like that element of it, that it's been a leveller in terms of communication. There's not a great deal I dislike about Twitter. Sometimes the 140 character limit can be a bit frustrating, but by the same token, that's what makes Twitter what it is. So at the moment, I don't have a great deal of dislikes. We produced the social media podcast, and the last episode we interviewed Neville Hobson, and he raised a few concerns about social media, Twitter in particular, that he can see developing in 2009. So at the moment, I personally don't have a great number of dislikes. However, I've taken on board what Neville had to say in the podcast, and I've got my eyes open for some things that could develop in 2009 that might start to sour things a little bit for Twitter, but we need to remain watchful just to make sure that happens or not. If I could change anything about Twitter, what would it be? I don't think a great deal. I think Twitter is evolving nicely on its own. It's powered by a community of people that are passionate about it, and when you've got a community like that behind anything, then it develops at its own pace and it develops in a satisfying way, and I think that's what's happened with Twitter. I use a number of different freely available tools to interact with Twitter. I will on occasion access twitter.com and post some information up online. I find twitter.com quite useful for tracking replies to my tweets. But on my laptop, I have 2 Twitter applications running pretty much all the time. I use TweetDeck for the Podcastmatters tweets. That's twitter.com/podcastmatters. So I use TweetDeck for that, and I also use TweetDeck to manage some of the noise on Twitter. I've got a group of influence where I've selected just a few users. I think there's only maybe 5 or 6 different Twitter users, and their tweets go into that panel on TweetDeck, because I feel that what they've got to say is maybe more relevant for what I do as my job than a lot of other people on Twitter. For the Tartan Podcast tweets, which I use Tartan Podcast for my own personal tweets, I use Twitterific for that. On the iPhone, I have another application, so it's actually 3 applications that I use in total. On the iPhone, I use Tweety. I think Tweety, even though it's a paid for application, is just the best iPhone application for Twitter. Just a couple of other things about Twitter that I think is useful mentioning. Do I have a criteria for following people on Twitter? Not particularly. I do use Tweety on the iPhone to search for Twitter users by locality. So I live in Glasgow, and I think it's quite important to be connected or following other Twitter users in Glasgow. Not just because of their location, but it's because they probably live close to me and they are consumers and users of social media. I find that personally quite important. Of course, I will search on Twitter for bloggers and social media experts, because I do value the opinion of the social media community, and as I've said before, Twitter's just an excellent way of getting that. I don't really have a criteria for unfollowing someone, and I wouldn't unfollow someone who stopped following me. I think Twitter's quite an organic thing, and I just let what happened on Twitter happen. So far, I haven't really encountered anybody that I've decided to unfollow. Obviously, you get ones that are obvious spammers, and it goes without saying that I unfollow them immediately. One of the questions that Tweetabix has been covering is whether Twitter should be monetised. My opinion is that anybody that creates a service that's used online and is of value should be rewarded monetarily for their efforts. I've got a number of users that I enjoy following the most. I always find Neville Hobson's got something valuable to say. CC Chapman and I go back to 2005. We started music podcasting around about the same time. I've used CC as a friend, so I love following him. There are others, Ewan Spence, and people in the Scottish social media community that I follow. The final question I want to answer on Tweetabix is, what do I see the future of Twitter being? I've got no doubt that Twitter is going to continue to grow, and it's going to become more and more mainstream. There'll be more and more people using Twitter as a resource, as valuable to them perhaps even as Google, I think that's what's ahead of Twitter. I don't see it fading away like some other microblogging or status update sites have done. I think Twitter has got a great future ahead of it, and I think it's going to become more and more of a valuable resource. If you'd like to feature on Tweetabix, or if you know someone who would be a great interview on Tweetabix, contact Richard Mackay. The details are on the website tweetabix.com, or you can find Richard on Twitter. It's twitter.com/hole in his eye.